just before it goes to the jury. The defense, of course, wrapped up their case yesterday with only a few words from their star witness. Here was the moment when the judge asked Caylee if she planned to testify.
Ms. Anthony, do you understand, first of all, is it your decision not to testify?
Yes, sir.
So let's bring in our legal team. Nancy Grace, the host of Nancy Grace on HLN in Atlanta, and right here in the studio, GMA legal analyst Dan Abrams. Thanks to both of you for coming again. And Dan, let me begin with you. I guess in the end, no big surprise that Caylee Anthony didn't testify.
No big surprise, except that now the defense is in a position where they have not a single bit of evidence to back up the claim that they made an opening statement about George Anthony abusing Caylee, about George Anthony disposing of the body. Not an iota of evidence. So I don't think they'll even be able to argue it in closing arguments at this point.
Nancy, do you think they even really considered, did Caylee ever really consider taking the stand?
Yes, I think that they really did consider it because that's the only source of evidence, as Dan pointed out. Many times in closing arguments, I've objected, number one, to throw the defense off of their closing statement, but fact's not an evidence. You can't just argue something out of whole cloth, but I'll tell you something I found out, another reason she did not take the stand in a sidebar, and the transcript is just coming out. The state warned the defense, if she takes a stand and you begin to talk about family dysfunction, we're going to bring in literally hundreds of checks Tot Mom stole from her mother and wrote. That's another thing that would have come in, and it wasn't while she was in grief.
But Nancy, we expected that they would bring in negative things about her if she testified. I don't believe that this came down to the last moment. If it had, this case has gone so badly for the defense that if they were really evaluating day by day, are we going to call her, aren't we going to call her, then they would have to have come to the conclusion that she had to testify. It seems to me that they decided a long time ago it's not going to happen.
And Nancy agrees.
Well, you know what? I think that's neither here nor there. Bottom line, she didn't testify, and they don't have a leg to stand on. They have proven nothing that they set out in the opening statement. They made their bed. Now they got to lie in it, and there's nothing they can do. There's a remote chance they may put something up in rebuttal after the state's rebuttal case.
This is now the defense is going to, and I know Nancy doesn't like this term, but the defense is going to have to shift gears a little bit, and they are they are going to have to now in closing arguments try as hard as they can.
They got to make up something else, Dan. That's what you mean? They got to make up another story.
Because they haven't put up any evidence behind this theory that they put out in the opening statement.
So now they're going to have to try to focus on the thing that I've been talking about, Nancy's been talking about since the opening statement, which is this idea that this was an accident and that the prosecution can't prove cause of death.
And Nancy, they did have a witness yesterday, Crystal Holloway, the alleged mistress of George Anthony, who said just that. She said that George Anthony told her it was an accident gone wrong.
Yeah, and what it came out in detail on her testimony was that he never said, Tot Mom said it was an accident. It was his wishful thinking is what he said on the stand. He wanted it to be an accident that went wrong and snowballed out of control. She never told him that, but I'll tell you another thing they did, and we predicted it right here the other day. They set Cindy Anthony, her mother, up for perjury charges because the state's going to bring in the records keeper for Cindy's employer to show she was there. She wasn't at home doing those deadly computer searches.
I want to get to that, Dan. That's what's going to happen today. The prosecution has their chance to rebut, and they're going to make this all about, focus all in on Cindy Anthony.
And this is crucial. I mean, absolutely crucial. The premeditation in this case is largely based on those computer searches. So if the prosecutors are now able to undermine Cindy Anthony's testimony.
Everybody, Cindy Anthony said that she did some of these chloroform searches in their house.
Right. In the sort of these very incriminating searches, Cindy Anthony saying, I did many of them. I was the one on the computer. If now the prosecutors can demonstrate that she was actually at work and that there was no way that she was at home doing these searches, then that's a very important piece of evidence.
That's right. Nancy, if they do that, nothing's left, right, for the defense?
No, there's nothing left. And what's so disturbing about it on so many levels is that they knowingly set Cindy Anthony up for perjury charges. I don't know if the state's going to follow through with them, but come on, what mother wouldn't put out her arm and say, here, give me the needle, not my daughter? I would do it. So they know Cindy will take the fall if she has to. They put her up there, and now she's going to be proved a liar under oath.
We've only got a few seconds left. I want each of you to weigh in quickly on the jury. Dan, what is the defense going to focus on? What is their hope with this jury?
Accident. The hope is that this jury forgets what they said in opening statement, and that somehow they're able to get this jury to focus on the fact that it's hard to demonstrate, based on the physical evidence, that the actual cause of death was a homicide as opposed to an accident. It's going to be a tough argument.
Nancy?
They're going to focus on cause of death and forensics. They're going to try to bring up that Kronk is a bad guy in some way, that George Anthony tried to commit suicide out of guilt. And don't worry, Jose Baez will try to argue that Top Mom was molested. The state's going to cut him off, and he's going to be smacked down by the judge right in front of the jury in closing statements. But he won't care.
And it could go to the jury this weekend. Nancy Grace, Dan Abrams, thanks a lot.